Okay, well, this is Gabe Coker, the columnist, writer of the Political Beast for the Modern State, ModState.com. Welcome, welcome. We have with us here today as our expert witness and commentator, Sheriff Tony Estrada from Santa Cruz County, Arizona, which is the southernmost county in the United States that shares a border with Mexico. Also with us, I have my editor-in-chief, Jonathan Deviney, who's joining us from sunny California. Before we get into our main topic, which is or was the topic of the interview that I did with Sheriff Estrada about a week ago, which is illegal immigration, I'd like to sort of break the ice a little bit, Sheriff Estrada, if you don't mind, by talking about something totally and completely foreign to that topic. I'd like to address this Great Britain leaving the European Union. Do you have any opinion on that, or how that might impact our country economically? I'm sorry if I'm catching you off guard with the question.
And that's fine. And I've been up on it just on the news. Obviously, that is not good news. It is shocking, the global economy, I guess even the United States. So obviously not a good thing, maybe a good thing for them. But we'll see how that turns out. Obviously, it's not something that people were welcoming. Maybe they were expecting it, and only they out there know why they feel it's important that they do that. But it appears like it will have its ramifications throughout the global.
The immigration issue, a lot of people on either side of the issue bring up the economic, the trade issues. Do you have you thought? And I know this. You haven't even had 24 hours to contemplate this, but have you thought at all how the Great Britain's trade issues with the European Union might somehow affect our trade with Mexico or within the North American Free Trade Agreement period?
I haven't given that much thought, and I'm really not too much into the economic issues affecting them, mostly into the obviously the public safety and law enforcement aspect of it. But any impact, economic impact around the world, definitely will have some impact on immigration, both legal and illegal.
All right. Well, let's move a little bit closer to home. And Jonathan, I'm gonna after I ask Sheriff Estrada this next question, I'm gonna try to get you involved. Let's talk about the presidential election. Sheriff Estrada, how does the population? My sense is that you have a pretty good finger on the pulse of your county. How does the population of Santa Cruz feel about the two presidential candidates?
Well, obviously there are debates and concerns because it appears like both candidates have issues that people will not feel comfortable with. Now, here in Nogales and Santa Cruz County, we're predominantly Democrat, so I feel that they will go a Democrat on this election. So usually that's a trend, that's a pattern that's followed here in Nogales and Santa Cruz County. So it will continue to get the support of the nominee for the Democratic Party. There's no question about it. And obviously, being a border county and about 90% Hispanics here, obviously there is some resentment towards the Republican nominee and his perception of Mexicans totally unfair, unjust, and obviously based on very little facts. So I think that obviously is going to work against him, at least here, and hopefully across the nation, the Hispanic community, the Latin community will recognize that as well and react accordingly to that, because I think it's an insult to what he has said.
Let me interject, Jonathan. You're in a state that has a large Hispanic population, and you come from a city in Louisiana, New Orleans, that is majority minority. It what is your sense as a journalist? You have your finger on so many different pulses. What's your sense? What's your sense of the different minorities that you talk with as a journalist, as where they stand on this presidential election? And quickly, we'll get to the immigration issue, but I really felt it was important to address this.
It's interesting because I get my haircut about 6 minutes from the border. It's about 10 minutes from Tijuana, and it's a Hispanic neighborhood that kind of reminds me the aesthetic of old Metairie of New Orleans in some ways. And long story short, there is a good deal of the feeling that Sheriff Estrada expressed as far as the resentment. The one thing I will say that kind of muddies the water a little bit is that yes, well, Mr. Trump is someone who is abrasive. There's a sense that the establishment candidate on the other side is that going to be a change that we need. So there's some willingness, I guess, to hear him out a little more if he's willing to say, okay, I misspoke, I'm sorry. He hasn't even tried any of that, so we don't even know if he wants to.
When you say him, you mean Donald Trump.
Correct. And I think there's a younger element that goes, okay, if the guy would be good for the economy as a manager and could tone this down, but again, he hasn't even tried to, Donald Trump has not even tried to walk back any of his, as Sheriff Estrada said, in my opinion, unfortunate remarks. So we'll see.
Well, Sheriff Estrada, I'm going to use Jonathan's, his sort of segue to get us into the primary issue, that we wanted to discuss. I'd like to do this a little differently, since this is a podcast and not an interview. I'd really like to sort of try something that I haven't ever seen done before, and I'd like to go backwards. I want to start because you are definitely the expert. You're the man where the rubber meets the road. You're the man with boots on the ground. You're the man.
Absolutely. Thank you for your service, sir.
Yeah. So what I want to do is I want to sort of, put a parentheses or a bracket or whatever in this podcast, and I'd like to start with the answer. Let's start with the answer, and then what we're going to do is we're going to work backwards toward whatever the core problem is, if we can even figure out what that is. So everyone that's going to be
several versions of that.
Everyone that's going to be listening to this podcast is going to be someone who is well informed and has read and listened to and watched different opinions about illegal immigration. So they all know the arguments. So let's start with the answer. You're the expert. Give us the answer. And if that's multiple answers, then give those to us.
Right. Well, and I think we discussed it before. And whenever anybody asks me, I don't think we have a magic wand that's going to take care of the problem of the issue. It's a phenomenon. It's not just here in America. It's happening all across the world. And it has to do with a lot of factors, obviously. Corruption, you're talking about gangs, you're talking about violence, you're talking about poverty, you're talking about so many things that are impacting on people, and they're finding solutions, that are looking for solutions. So, here in the United States, I've said it before, I think we need to stop spending all our resources in building walls and trying to find people that are here and trying to deport them. There's a lot of people, obviously, in the United States that are here illegally, and it's just not Mexicans. We got people from other races that are here, but it always seems to be like the Hispanics and the Latins are the ones that seem to be the target for all of this criticism and concern.
All right, well, stop, Sheriff, stop for just a second, because like I said, I'm trying to work backwards to the root of this problem.
Yeah, so, I'm trying to get to the answer. That
I want to stop you. I want to stop you because you bring up the suggestion of racism. Do you feel that there is some sort of racial motivation behind the various solutions, so-called, to illegal immigration that target Latins?
No, I don't think that's the main factor behind it. I think it's just the fact that they're looking at individuals as intruders, obviously, because they're not legally coming over. So the fact that they are poor, the fact that they're marginal in a lot of ways, there is obviously some issues about that of a discrimination that people that don't have all the resources that are marginalized, and they are criticized, and definitely there is a concern about that. I don't think that's the driving force behind it, but it does have to be taken into consideration. It cannot be ignored.
Do you experience it? Do you experience any discrimination? Eyes cut sideways at you from Caucasian members of your population?
No, some of them are my best friends, obviously, and we're a majority here, so that's not really a problem. I've never experienced that. People may not agree with me and my policies and what I do, but that comes from Anglo-Saxons, that comes from Hispanic, and it can come from anybody. So I've never really felt discrimination or looked down at, because I've always taken the position that I'm as good of a person as anybody else, regardless of race.
So, but before I get off of the potential racism issue, I want to ask, you said in the beginning of our podcast that the majority of your county is votes for the Democrat Party, and I'm not. I worked for a Democrat Secretary of State here in Mississippi when I was in college, and have voted Republican, most of my life. So I'm a pretty balanced person, I would hope. But what is it about the Democrat Party that's answering the problems in the eyes of the people of Santa Cruz County?
Well, you look at Nogales and Santa Cruz County, of the 4 border counties here in Arizona, we're the smallest and we're the poorest along the border here. So, we always look at that and say, why are we ignored, or why are we neglected here along the border, because we're predominantly Hispanic or because we're a poor county. So, you wonder sometimes why people don't reach out to us more often and recognize our challenges here along the border and get more assistance from state and the federal government.
Well, Jonathan, I'm going to bring you in here. You've done a lot of research and have written quite a bit about the welfare state and about the involvement of the federal government in individual people's lives. So I'll ask you, what's your response to what it sounds like? And again, Sheriff Estrada, I will be more than happy to let you respond to Jonathan's answer to this question. But Jonathan, what is your response to Sheriff Estrada's call for more federal assistance because this is a poor county? Is there a racial element involved? Is more welfare the answer? Just address all of that.
Well, as far as that county goes, obviously I can't speak to the individual demographics, but I would hope that there's certainly no racism overt in this day and age about this. I hope that it's, as the sheriff said, classism, because obviously that's very disappointing if anybody's policies on a national level, it comes out they just don't like Mexicans. If it's that's really abominable. So I hope that he's 100% correct on that. As far as the party goes, you asked the sheriff if why the Democratic Party has that allure, was the gist of your question. To get to that, I think there's a big perception on the other side, or toward the other side of the GOP, that they want to do away with the social safety net. That there's a sort of, I guess you could say, heartless element that, well, these are poor, marginalized people, and they're not my children. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that that's kind of the feel of the Republican Party amongst minorities a lot of times. The feeling is that they don't care. I personally, would like to see that change and see absolutely more outreach to minorities and say, hey, we can be a democratic republic with a limited federal system and still not let people starve. I don't think there's really an excuse in a country as wealthy as America for us not to at least take a look at what Sheriff Estrada is saying and acknowledge what we've done thus far hasn't worked. So perhaps it's time to consider change.
Well, so, Sheriff Estrada, would you like to respond to that at all?
No, well, I agree with him. You know, and I think people look at things differently, and they look at the border differently. And the further you get away from the border, the perception changes dramatically. So they really don't understand the nature, the history, and the challenges along the border. They just see the border as being a threat to America, and that it's not being under control.
So to wrap up this part of the discussion, what it sounds like you're saying, Sheriff, is that it's different than poverty or welfare or federal services in other parts of the country, that it's just the border presents a special, complex, it requires a special, complex response.
Correct. We're unique in a lot of ways. The challenges are unique, very different from anything that happens inland. So I think that has to be recognized, and it has to be addressed. And if we're going to have a safe or a more secure border, I think that the resources have to be applied, and not just by the federal government, because we have a lot of Border Patrol agents here. They're doing a great job. But I think the locals, the city police, and ourselves, we do need some more assistance, because we obviously want to be good partners. We want to be good partners on this, and we have a lot of history. We have a lot of knowledge. We're bicultural, bilingual. We know families on both sides of the border. We can be and have been very crucial and helpful in dealing with issues here along the border. So I think that has to be taken into account. But yeah, definitely. Do we need resources? Yes, we do. Do we get some? Yes, we do. Do we need more? Definitely.
All right, well, before we get to the issue that you just addressed about families on either side of the border, which is going to lead us, obviously, into the inevitable discussion about the potential wall, again, I wanted to start with the answer and work back to the problem, and I'm going to take a card out of your deck from the article that I wrote, where you argued that the primary problem, again, we're trying to work our way back to the core of the problem, was drugs. And I want to discuss with you, I'm going to warn you ahead of time that I'm going to have a pretty strong opinion that may disagree with you on this. This isn't an interview, remember, it's a podcast. So I'm allowed to have an opinion. And Jonathan, I'm sure you're going to want to weigh in on this.
I may. Real quick, I know I swore I was not going to interrupt, but just real quick, I would like to say that I would like to see us, rather than as a party, even though, yes, I'm a centrist Republican, but let's look at that situation on the border there as an opportunity. And we invested in Europe in the Marshall Plan after World War II. I don't see how we can do worse by, investing in our own people in that area.
Yeah, yes, I completely agree. I've talked with, I have many Hispanic friends, and I've had this conversation with them. We talk about turning towards Europe, turning towards Russia, you're hitting a reset button, and we've got millions of people directly on our southern border who have tremendous respect for us, who want to partner with us. Why the hell are we worrying about China, who doesn't necessarily like us, Saudi Arabia, who is funding terrorism to kill us, and we've got all of these people on our southern border who want nothing more than to partner with us? This is ridiculous.
Well, the one final caveat I would say to that is also Sheriff Estrada mentioned how it's the Latin population tends to get picked on, it seems like, with this. I think that's a fair assertion overall. But a lot of people aren't aware that we have just as big of a problem almost with Chinese immigrants coming here illegally. So I just wanted to bring that up in the interest of fairness and agreement with Sheriff Estrada that there's other issues than just Mexicans on the border. We've got other borders
Sheriff?
Thank you for that. I agree with you, and I appreciate you mentioning that, because I think Mexican, Hispanics, and Latinos have had a target in their back for too long.
Yes, sir.
I completely agree. The Italians and the Irish who came over in the late 1800s caused far more crime, far more problems. And I have nothing against Italians or Irish, but they caused far more crime than Mexicans or Latins have ever caused. And yet somehow we decide that we wanted to focus on them because they're brown. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Well, Donald Trump's orange, so let's move on.
There you go. There you go. Okay, Sheriff, I'm going to turn this over to you. And again, like I said, we're going to probably have a little bit of a clash of ideas here, which is healthy. But I want to talk to you about drug prohibition. I gave you a little bit of a hard time when I interviewed you, and I didn't put anything about your opinion on whether or not drugs should be illegal in my article, because I felt it was a distraction. But I want to bring it out now. I want to bring it out, and I want to put an exclamation point on it. Tell us your position on the legalization of marijuana and or any other drugs. Go ahead. You have the floor.
Okay, I'm old-fashioned. I haven't done that. I'm not a cigarette smoker either, but I was brought up that was not good, and the people that were using marijuana back there were outcasts. I mean, really people you don't want to have to deal with. That has changed. It's more accepted now, obviously, and it's more frequent now. But I don't believe that is the answer. I don't believe that legalizing drugs, marijuana, or anything else is going to make the situation any better. I definitely am against it. I do believe, just like alcohol and tobacco are harmful, and they may be more harmful than marijuana, but that doesn't excuse the fact that we should legalize marijuana. I just think it's a bad choice to do that, and I'm not for it. Definitely, I'm not for it. It will create more problems. It will create solutions. I can tell you that.
I'm going to ask you the same question I asked you when I interviewed you for the article, although this didn't go into the column. How do you justify the hypocrisy of opposing the ending of prohibition of a drug, which, by the way, I do not use? I do drink. I do not smoke marijuana. But how do you justify the hypocrisy of not wanting to end prohibition of marijuana when alcohol is obviously so much more dangerous, and so much more dangerous, especially when you're behind the wheel of a moving vehicle?
Well, I had no say on that issue. I wasn't even around, but I do have a say now on marijuana. So I think that has to be considered.
So you would end the legalization of alcohol if it was left in your hands and your hands only?
If at that time that issue were to come up, and I would recognize that there was a need to do that, but I didn't live that era, so I don't know, and I had no input on it. So we're stuck with it. We live with it, and we do the best that we can with it. Okay,
Jonathan, I'm going to throw this over to you because as much respect as I have for Sheriff Estrada and as available as he's been, for me as a journalist, I have to say what this sounds like is a man at the end of his law enforcement career, getting ready to retire, who just wants to say, look, I wasn't there when the law was passed, so I'm just enforcing the law as it is, and no, I'm not supporting any changes in the law. Jonathan, give me your response.
Well, I think there's a couple of factors here that cloud this, that make this difficult to really answer. Number one, I have the utmost respect for Sheriff Estrada and the role he plays in our society, and thank you again, sir. And he obviously has indelible experience that I'll never have. I look at countries that, for instance, the Libertarian Party says, well, look at what they've done in Amsterdam. Okay, it's misrepresented in that case because drugs are not legal to be used everywhere in the Netherlands. It's a certain district they call the red light district. And also, you're talking about apples and oranges. This is a country of 330 million people, we think. I have a very big concern, for instance, with cities like New Orleans that say that killing a cop is now a hate crime. I agree with that. But legalizing hard drugs kind of caused the problem we're trying to prevent. One of the goals is, for instance, let's stop minimum sentences. Well, if we make killing cops nationally a hate crime, I just have to wonder if legalizing, say, cocaine, any kind of hard drugs, for instance, could that not lead to the death of more law enforcement officers? I wouldn't want to be a cop walking the streets with cocaine and with crack cocaine and heroin illegal. I'm sorry. I feel like marijuana is a different issue. I feel like alcohol is a different issue.
Well, let me ask. All right. Well, let me ask you this, Jonathan. Then I'll ask the same question to the sheriff. Is the primary problem with drugs, is it that they're too expensive, so it leads to breaking and entering and and stuff and violent crime, robbery? Or is the primary problem with drugs being illegal the fact that the consistency is not the same, so people tend to overdose because they don't know what they're getting because the product isn't regulated? Or is the problem addiction? In other words, people, dropping out of their jobs, dropping out of their parenting, what is it that is the problem with drugs? Like, what is it? Is it that it creates crime, or is that it is addiction that destroys lives? Like, what is it that really is the problem?
I feel like that's when you start pulling at that thread, you start to unravel the entire sweater, because I think every one of those things is so, and this isn't a cop-out answer by any means, but, it's not as simple as, okay, high unemployment equals crime. Well, why didn't we have the worst crime in history in 1929? So it's not as simple as just reading metrics and going, we're going to plug this value in here.
Right.
There
Right.
are human beings that have created an inherently flawed system because, again, it's created by human beings who have no self-control. And now, and this is another topic, but it's been referenced in an article in ModState recently, but my father made the point that people used to respect the police. Now, people aren't afraid of the police anymore. And so, it's a disaster all around the way the policy is being run. I'm not necessarily advocating for complete change, but we've got to find a balance between protecting the rights of people, preserving the lives of our brave men and women in law enforcement uniforms, and not sending people to prison for possessing an ounce of marijuana, for instance, third time in a state like Mississippi. That's a felony. And then they're in there with rapists and murderers. I have to say, I completely agree with that. There's just too many issues here to say there's
No, but I think you've hit on, and I'm going to kick it back to the sheriff. You described all of the different problems, obviously, with drugs and drug addiction and drug violence. But I think you hit, in my opinion, the core of the problem, which is the way that we respond. People are going to do drugs. People are going to get high. They are going to get addicted, and they are going to need to continue to feed that addiction. The only question is, how do we respond? And these minimum sentences that we had in the 90s, that I applauded, by the way, thought the best thing about Bill Clinton was his tough on crime stance, has been an abysmal failure. And this, obviously, is where I need to blush and pass it off to the expert who deals with this on an everyday basis. Sheriff?
Well, you know what? I guess it'll boil down to this. Why? Why do we have to give people everything they want, even if it's not good for them? Why do we have to do that?
So that's a cogent argument, but the number one killer in the United States is heart disease. So why don't we ban McDonald's Happy Meals and Coca-Cola?
Definitely, and obviously that's their choice. That's their choice. But when you're gonna make marijuana, that's not a meal available. Why do we have to give people what they want all the time? Why is it? Why is it that we can't say this is not obviously good for you? It's not good for law enforcement. It's not good for public safety. What we have here is people that are breaking into houses, they're stealing, they're robbing. Why? Because they want to maintain a habit, whether it's marijuana they want to get their hands on, or whether it's other hard drugs. Now, if you legalize marijuana, they're still going to be doing that because they'll need the money to buy it. So that's not the answer. Making marijuana available is not the answer. It's just another level of issue that we're going to have to deal with, and we don't need any more issues.
I don't want to, get a blockbuster out of this podcast or anything, but I have to say, just as a comment, it does sound, after talking to you pretty extensively about this, it does sound like there is still a question in your mind whether or not there's an answer to accommodating these addicts rather than locking them up.
I don't believe we should be either one, accommodating them, or we should be locking them up either. But I don't think we should be giving them free passage and clearance to have these kind of drugs. I mean, we're just contributing to a problem, and that problem, it may very well wind up in having to arrest people as a result of it, for whatever reason that they do something. But I'm just saying that I don't see why we have to keep accommodating people all the time. When we understand that it's not going to be any better by doing that. It's not going to solve any problem.
I'm going to ask you to address the other issue before we wrap up with our discussion of the wall, which is sort of looming large over this podcast. The other issue, the mandatory minimum sentencing for users or drug dealers. Where do you stand on that?
I think that should be at the discretion of the judge, because a lot of factors kick in on that. Obviously probation officers will file a report about the individual. There's so many things that have to be taken into consideration, and the judge should not be tied down and say, you will do it regardless. I think the judge has to have that discretion to be able to look at each and every case and decide on its merit. I do not agree with handcuffing the judge and telling him, after so many offenses, this is what you have to do. I don't think that's right.
Okay, well, that is concise. All right, well, let's move on. Jonathan, you have anything else you want to say about that before we move on to the wall?
No, I think I'll defer to Sheriff Estrada here.
All right. Okay, well, Sheriff Estrada, we'll kick it back to you once again. The wall. So the concept of the wall was the primary topic of the column that I wrote this past week, based on an interview with you. All right, so the idea of a wall, period. Let's argue for a moment that Donald Trump could do what he claims and build a wall that was incapable of being tunneled under or jumped over. Is that an answer? What would be the effect of that if it were to happen? And then we can deal with whether or not it could ever be accomplished.
Okay, I think a wall is an option. It obviously divides two countries, and possibly very necessary to have that in order to recognize where you're at. So a wall is important. However, the wall, it may be an option. It's not the answer, and it's not going to stop people from coming over. Let me give you an example of what happened tonight. Well, tonight we got a call. We got a 911 call from an individual. There were 3 individuals that were trying to cross the border, and they were going to succeed because they were going up here on the west side. They were going to cross the border illegally, and a group on the Mexican side detained them and told them, you will, as you cross over, or as you jump over the fence, you will take drugs with you. And they said, no, we're not going to do that. And that was done at gunpoint. So what happened to these 3 individuals, they took them to the fence and they tied them. They tied them to the fence to punish them for it. So that 911 call came in. We went up there, Border Patrol went in there, and Border Patrol apprehended these individuals. So, the wall does not stop that kind of activity. It does not stop it. It may deter it. It may slow it down. But that's not going to be the answer. You're going to spend money on something that is not going to solve the problem.
So, what is the problem with the United States building a wall if, I know you're saying it's not effective, that it causes problems, but if the majority of the people in this country decide that they support building an impenetrable wall, so-called, as you and I have discussed, you can tunnel under it, you can boat around it, you know, I understand all of that. What I'm saying is if the United States of America, as a majority, decides that they want to build a wall, do they have that right?
Oh, definitely. They can spend as much money as they want on it. That's perfectly fine. You know, obviously they live away from the border, so they'll feel that that's going to be.
By the way, when I say they, I understand that you are one of those they, because you are one of us. I understand that. You are as American as me or Jonathan.
If they decide to build a wall, if they decide to put money into it, that's fine. I mean, go ahead, go for it. Is that going to solve the problem? In my opinion, it's not going to solve the problem. So they can throw money at it. They can make the wall. They're free to do that if that's what they decide to do. I'm not going to get in the way. Obviously, I'll give them my opinion about it. That they will be wasting their time and their money.
Right. Let me ask this: when you look at, and we discussed when we were working on the article, the Berlin Wall, and you pointed out importantly, you know, the difference between the two. You know, the Berlin Wall was meant to keep people in, and Trump's wall is meant to keep people out. Well, I'll tell you what. Before I ask the question that I wanted to ask Jonathan, you're a student of history. Before I let you go, because I know that you have another engagement, would you like to comment on the Trump wall, the Berlin Wall?
Well, it's kind of interesting to have someone want to come to the presidency and as a policy solution build a wall, like me wanting to promote ModState in Silicon Valley. Hey, I'm ready to start my business, and I show up with a wheelbarrow and a tape measure. They're looking at me going, what are you doing? What are we hoping to accomplish with this wall? Seriously, we're not going to turn it into the DMZ like it is in Korea. We're not going to do that. Let's look at this. All right, what's the problem? Problem is we've got an economic issue, we've got immigration, we've got drugs. Well, how do we make that better? Not how do we punish people. And I'm not going to label anybody, but I think this business of, well, you don't agree with the wall or you don't agree with this, well, you must not be a good American. That's got to stop. We got to be able to have discussions like we've had today. And as far as the wall goes, I think it's useless. I think it's a waste of money, but that's never stopped the Fed before.
Right.
So if we want to address what really matters here, yeah, let's do what we did. I'll close with this. Let's do what we did in post-World War II Europe with the Marshall Plan. We did it for foreigners, but take care of our own. And that includes places like Santa Cruz County where, okay, we're not talking about cradle to grave in any state. I'm saying let's help these people keep their lives together, so that they can enjoy the pursuit of happiness. Not the guarantee of, but the pursuit of.
Jonathan, thank you so much. It was great. It was great having you. I'm going to wrap. I'm going to wrap up with the sheriff.
I think I told you this before. I don't want anybody to get the feeling, and I said this before to you, that I'm for illegal immigration. I'm not. Like everybody else, I think people should come over legally, but the situation, the stark reality is that's not going to happen for a lot of reasons. These are poor people that are not ever going to get a visa. So I think we're stuck with that phenomenon, and we have to deal with it. And like Jonathan just said, the wall is not the solution.
Jonathan, thank you. I'm going to wrap up with the sheriff, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right,
You
take care, gentlemen.
You appreciate it. Nice meeting you, Jonathan.
All right, you too,
All right,
Sheriff, and
Sheriff,
thank
Sheriff.
you for your service. Take care.
Sheriff, as we wrap up, the last really question issue, it relates to the wall. I'd like to ask, out of curiosity, when you look at situations like Israel with their wall, which they very effectively are able to monitor, to patrol, and to only allow in the people that they want, which is, cut down on terrorism dramatically. And here in our situation, we have Mexicans who want to come over here and work. Over there, they have Palestinians who want to come over and die killing Israelis. Yet they've been very successful with their wall. So is it not possible that we're just not doing it right?
Well, I'm pretty sure that we can do better, definitely, but I think the situation is entirely different. You may be talking about that greater majority of people that are coming over, not coming over here to do anybody any harm. As a matter of fact, they're probably coming here to do some good for the country, as has been, shown throughout decades here. But can we do a better job? Definitely. I think there's always room for progress. Can you control it better? Definitely. Can you eliminate it? Absolutely not.
All right. Last topic. The remittances that are sent from the United States to Mexico. Forget the wall. We're talking about people who are, here working legally or illegally and sending money back to Mexico. Do you, from what you observed, is this a net gain or a net loss for the United States?
I think it's a win-win situation for both, and I'll tell you why. As they send money back home to these poor people, keeps them there, gives them a way to live, gives them a livelihood. Otherwise, they would probably be coming over here also. So I think it works in the sense that they're able to send money back. They're able to help the economy over there. They help their own people, their own family. You will notice that these are family-oriented, and they care a lot about family, and that's why they come over here and they send money back. So I think it helps. It helps the people over there. It helps in keeping them there, and it helps in improving the quality of their life. So I think it's a good thing. It is definitely a good thing, and it's a good thing for both sides.
Sheriff, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate your help with the article. Really appreciate your attendance here on the inaugural podcast of the Political Beast. And to our listeners, I am very excited to announce that we will have a sponsor to announce on our second podcast. Sheriff Estrada, we hope to speak to you again.
I'll be available, and that's kind of my position along the border, so thanks for the opportunity to kind of bring that up.